Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. On this podcast, we pull from the seemingly endless queue of movies, television shows, and maybe even other surprises along the way as part of our podcast channel, From the Queue. On this episode, we are going to be discussing our top 10 movies of 2023. Please subscribe, like, and review From the Queue on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform, especially Spotify and Apple, as you can get those algorithms going with positive feedback. You can also find our channel on BlueSky at From the Queue. You can find us on Instagram, Threads, even X for now, at From the Queue. If you're listening to us on YouTube, all the links will be in the description below. My name is Jerome Cusson. You can find me on Instagram at Jerome Cusson. You can find me on BlueSky at Jerome C1985. My co-host my usual co-host is not here. It's not Brian. It is Ben Phillips, formerly of The Real World, and now kind of doing his own thing. And Ben, what have you got to plug? What social media platforms do you want people to find you on?
Oh, no social media platforms. I post
you just want to be anonymous.
Yeah, I mean, Letterboxd. If you want to follow me on Letterboxd, it's my regular NQUOID, Encoid. That's basically where I'll be most active in 2024. Follow along as I watch a whole lot of movies from 2000 to 2009. Maybe sometimes I'll even say words about them. But yeah, no social media platforms. I don't tweet enough. I don't Instagram or Facebook enough to make it worthwhile to follow me. So Letterboxd is definitely the one that you want to follow me on, really.
All right, so Ben and I did this last year for The Real World. We did our top 10, and I can think of no better time to talk about our top 10 2023 movies than in the last week of January. So Ben, before we get into our top 10, I kind of want to hit like 3 news stories really quickly. You can give your reactions to them. So I think these are kind of the top 3. Like if I were to create headlines for the year, these would be my top 3. Number 3, of course, is the writers and actors strike that really took over my social media platforms for 6 months with everybody on the picket lines. It obviously delayed a bunch of movies from coming out this year, 2024 release dates. It looks pretty dire out there. We did not get Dune 2. We did not get Zendaya babysitting her white boys either. So it's kind of been very chaotic, and just as things were seemingly returning back to whatever normal there is in a pandemic world that no longer observes quarantines, the strikes kind of have postponed all of that. So that's one of the big stories. I would say the second big story is the fact that superhero movies, the popularity is waning pretty badly. Just about every DC movie bombed pretty badly. You had kind of the first quote-unquote bomb for Marvel Studios, as the Marvels did not do nearly as well as you would have expected. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 did extremely well, but that was kind of an outlier for the year 2023. And number 1, I would say, is Barbenheimer. It really made a difference in the box office. 2 of the most popular movies of 2023. And they are both going to be getting some serious awards consideration as well, with Oppenheimer being one of the leaders to potentially win Best Picture, Best Director, and even Best Actor. Barbenheimer really made the movies feel like an event again, whether it was for the lulz or for the memes, regardless. It really felt like Barbenheimer is one of the first events that we've had in quite some time, and you just felt it all over the place. Both movies, I think, coming out on the same day. I mean, it's an accident, but I think it really benefited both movies. And I'm not going to get into the debate about which movie it helped more, but I'm going to guess that some people that would not have seen either movie or both movies or one of the two, I think that it really engaged the masses more so than a lot of other movies in the last few years. So Ben, any thoughts on those 3 stories. Anything? And do you feel I missed anything?
No, I mean, I think that's a fairly kind of robust view of the entire year. I mean, obviously the two strikes were the center of the middle of the year. I think the WGA agreement was definitely more robust than the SAG agreement. I think the SAG agreement's got some kind of gaping holes in it, particularly in the protections against AI, especially in regards to kind of like background actors, and then the video game voice actors. I've had some very big concerns this week where I think they've ratified something to do with AI on that front. So I think AI was always going to be the turning point on this latest round of kind of the strikes and the agreements that we got to with the studios. And I don't think either guild kind of like properly managed to combat AI in the way that they should have, but we're obviously on the other side of it. They're back working again. We'll see where the cinematic landscape lands at the end of this year. I think if you were a cinephile, you're kind of looking for the festival season this year to kind of like see what's actually going to be coming out because it feels like there's going to be nothing really big. What Marvel have got Deadpool 3, DC have got nothing. I don't think there's any. Oh no, they got Joker 2. Joker 2 is coming out. So those are the two big superhero movies. I think both of those are in regards to the kind of crashing and burning of superhero movies in a year where basically everything flopped apart from Barbenheimer, as you say, Guardians 3, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse as well. Like Deadpool 3 and Joker 2 are kind of two of the ones that are probably in a stronger position to kind of get away from the general superhero fatigue in the world, even though I would argue it's kind of, yes, it's centered on superhero fatigue because that's what all blockbusters are, but it is a general malaise across like all genres. Like Disney's animation output was kind of flopping, and Indiana Jones was flopping, and Warner Brothers had no movies outside of their superhero stuff. So the bright spots are bright, but they're not on the level of replacing the kind of like $2-3 billion movies that we get every single year, other than Mario, other than Barbie, other than Oppenheimer, which will kind of like should probably pass that $1 billion mark once it's done its second IMAX run kind of later on this month, I think. But that's because no one's got anything to put in cinemas because of the strikes going on. So Oppenheimer will get to clear up and actually get to be $1 billion 3-hour IMAX centered release.
And we may get to talk more about Oppenheimer later on. So let's talk about our top 10 lists. So part of the trick is because Ben is in the UK and I'm in the United States, there are different release dates. So there are some movies that are not on my list, but that is because they were perhaps on my list last year. And that is true for Ben as well. There is a movie that Ben originally had in his top 10 that I literally cannot see. So he removed it from his top 10. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about this movie next year. If it's that good, I definitely want to at least acknowledge it.
It's so good as a movie. Hitman was in my 10. My one worry is Netflix have bought the rights to it, and the whole thing of that movie is like it's so good with the crowd, like incredible with the crowd, and I do not trust Netflix to give this the cinematic rollout that it needs to have to kind of like properly hit in the way that it will. And so everyone will be watching it on their TVs and kind of like, I don't get why everyone was like so over the moon with this thing. So a shame, but like, yeah, hopefully Hitman gets a proper rollout later on this year, seeing as it's done, it's ready, and it's a year with a complete dearth of content.
For sure. So I do have to say that in putting my list together, I really felt like last year my top 10 was kind of set in stone by December and nothing was going to change it. This year, though, there was a lot of movement late. I saw two of the movies that are in my top 10 on the same day in late December. So I think that just shows how mobile my list has been. But I do have to say that in terms of the diversity, not just in terms of ethnicities and nationalities, sexuality, this is one of the most diverse lists that I've had in a long time. So I'm really happy with sort of the put out. I'm not sure I saw anything as good as Everything Everywhere All at Once and RRR last year, but this was still this top 10 was very difficult to put together, and I would tell you that anything in my top 15 could absolutely have been in my top 10, and we can get into some of the kind of runners up a little bit later. But Ben, any thoughts on your list? Any prologues before we get into it?
I mean, obviously, a lot of my stuff I actually saw at the London Film Festival. I mean, I'm looking at my 10. I think half of my list I either could have had tickets or only just missed out on tickets for the London Film Festival. So I think it does show, as you said, like how back weighted this year was in terms of like it's just all this year is odd in terms of like all of the awards players this year are actually really good solid movies. I don't think there's a single movie kind of in contention for the best picture run this year where I'm like, oh God, what are we doing here? What is this travesty? There's no Joker, or there's no Promising Young Woman, or there's no Belfast, or any of those movies where I'm just kind of like holding my nose and going like, oh God. And it just led to this really stacked kind of like November, December, January rollout in the UK and in America. I've seen from like there are people literally today complaining about the quote unquote botched rollout of a movie that's in my top 10 that I thought had actually had like a fairly robust release kind of this weekend, I think.
Okay, so are you talking about Zone of Interest?
I am talking about Zone of Interest.
Yeah, it's been weird. That's a movie. Unfortunately, I was not able to see, and I really did want to for this list. Anatomy of a Fall is also something that would be on my list of shame. That these are movies that I literally may be seeing in the next few days, but unfortunately, they will not qualify for this podcast. Ben, any other movies of shame that you have not been able to see that maybe would have been in your top 10, or at least in consideration?
I mean, not ones I was able to see. I feel like Iron Claw is the one that's kind of like in my taste. I love the director of Iron Claw. He like I love The Nest. I love Martha, Mary, May, and Marceline, I think is the title. I always botch that one. So Iron Claw's one that I wish I could have seen. Obviously, American Fiction, kind of the last Best Picture nominee that I've not seen. There's little things like Taste of Things, Fallen Leaves, but all of these are like things that I had to miss or haven't come out yet, and I'm gonna do like a big final binge, kind of like as we head towards the end of award season. So
For
that's
sure, I'm definitely going to be doing the same. I mean, like I said, this 2024 is going to be such a weird year that I feel like I'm going to be watching a lot more older stuff and things that are not released in this year. And if I don't see like 120 movies, I'll honestly be okay with that because, again, it's just going to be a very weird year. So, what is your number 10 movie of 2023?
my number 10 movie of 2023 is May December. A Sky release over in the UK, but I believe a Netflix release in the US. Obviously, Natalie Portman, Julianne Moore, Charles Melton, directed by Todd Haynes. A phenomenal movie that is causing so much discourse in a way that I'm kind of it's bad discourse, but it's kind of bad discourse in a way that kind of shows how badly people are misreading the movie. In that this is a incredibly funny, incredibly dark movie about a incredibly kind of like fucked up situation, and then about halfway through the movie it kind of like transforms itself into this very different thing, and that's where Charles Melton is really getting to kind of like put himself forward as be like you look at the critics awards and they're all giving the Charles Melton the supporting trophy over Robert Downey Jr., over Ryan Gosling, over Robert De Niro, and I think he's worth it. It is one of the best performances I've seen in so long from an actor who was on Riverdale, where he is acting Portman and Moore off the screen, and those two are no slouches in this movie either. I think it's probably the best cast movie of the year. I think it's one of the funniest movies of the year. I think it's one of the most dramatic, kind of like affecting, twisted movies of the year. It's weird I don't have it higher, but yeah, May December is like a triumph across the board.
So this movie ended up being number 23 on my list. So not quite as high, but I still really enjoyed it. I would agree with you. I think Charles Melton, if he were to win Best Supporting Actor, I would not be super mad about it. But I mean, to me, and I think you said a lot there, but Natalie Portman is probably one of our best working actors, and every time she does a movie, it feels like it should be a bigger deal, just because she doesn't do a movie every year. She's very picky and choosy about her projects, despite a movie that she did with Noah Hawley that nobody saw, and you can confirm it exists, right?
I saw it in the cinema. I was alone. Sorry, I wasn't alone. Someone walked out halfway through, so I was alone for the second half of the movie. But yeah, a bad movie. Also, she did Thor like 2 years ago, a year ago.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, she did Thor: Love and Thunder, a movie that definitely happened and does exist. But let's talk. I think that this movie, in terms of just the way that it was done, I mean, you should know just listening to the music of this movie, the kind of vibe that they are going for. And I think Todd Haynes pretty much nails it. I wasn't super into the ending of the movie, but I was into just about everything else. And I mean, look, I've seen this on a number of top 10 lists. I certainly don't blame people. I still think this movie is really good. It was well worth a watch. I almost think it works. The discourse is bad, but watching this on television almost makes more sense than seeing it in a movie theater. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, yeah.
Given like what the movie is, I think it actually plays better on TV than it would on a big screen because I think they're going for that lifetime vibe, and I think it makes more sense that way.
Oh yeah, like it is totally going for that. Like Natalie Portman is potentially doing this for a Lifetime movie, which makes even more of like that knife twist at the good movie all around. What's your number 10, Jerome?
Are you there, Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. This is a movie that I saw very early in the year, relatively speaking. I saw this in April. I think this is a very charming. In terms of like the slightness, the smallness. You look. We're going to go through the rest of my list, and there's going to be a lot of big ideas, a lot of big things going on. This is just a very. This is a coming of age movie. This is one of the best coming of age movies that I've seen in a really long time. You mentioned Charles Melton for supporting actor, and to me, Rachel McAdams, if she were to win for best supporting actress, that would be a triumph. I think she is absolutely wonderful. This movie is a delight, and it's unfortunate that it's not getting more awards buzz. I know that this movie was in theaters for quite some time. It definitely got a lot of really good energy. I was hoping that kind of the momentum would be able to maintain. Unfortunately, it hasn't, but you should definitely check this out if you have not done so. And I also want to give special shout out to Abby Ryder Fortson, who plays the titular Margaret Simon. She was the young Cassie in the first two Ant-Man movies, and I think she was good in those. I think she's really good in this movie as well. You've got Kathy Bates, you've got Benny Safdie, who has had quite a year, 2023. And yeah, this movie is just a triumph. It's really small, but this movie stayed on my top 10 for the whole of the last 7 months. It withstood an onslaught of really, really good movies, but I felt like it was really important to slot this one just because I think it's the kind of movie that we need to see more of these kinds of movies in theaters.
Yeah, I had it at number 33 on my list, but also like Rachel McAdams is my pick for like the best supporting actress of 2023. I don't know if it's the slightness. I think the adult portion of it is actually the thing which I think is the most felt and effective. And obviously that is not stuff that is in the book. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. That is stuff that Kelly Freeman Craig has kind of like added into this movie, and I think it is just genuinely like some of the best work of adaptation of this year, in a year that is really, really stacked in terms of adaptation as well. The kid stuff is like really, really good. I think it's like really, really solid coming of age story stuff. I think it's a little bit less effective than Edge of 17, which was Freeman Craig's last movie before this. But yeah, it's the Rachel McAdams stuff, the Benny Safdie stuff, the Kathy Bates, like the adult portion of it that kind of like really drives this into being one of the best of the year. And when I say it's like number 33 on my list, like this is a year which I think is just frankly insane in terms of movies. And there are movies where like in a better year below Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, I would be happy to have in my top 10. So yeah, not a ding on it. It is one of the best films of the year.
Absolutely, I concur. So your number 9?
My number 9 this year was in fact The Zone of Interest, which I got to see at the London Film Festival. Technically not out in the UK for a little bit longer, but I really love Jonathan Glazer. How many Jonathan Glazers have you seen? Have you done the full all four of his like very weird, very distinct filmography?
I don't think that I don't know that I've seen a Jonathan Glazer movie, but my intention is to see Zone of Interest as soon as possible. I mean, it just feels like maybe this movie is a little relevant given current events. I don't know.
Yeah, it came up at the London Film Festival screening when the conflict in Israel and Palestine came up literally as Jonathan Glazer is doing the speech of the movie, and he's like, I hope this, like, obviously it's a very charged political topic, and he didn't come down on the sides. You can't you can't tell where he's at with it, but you can tell that like he is a very open filmmaker who is shining light on these atrocities in a very interesting way. Being that Zone of Interest is, for those who don't know, a movie about a German family who live literally on the outskirts of Auschwitz, and it's a movie which barely acknowledges the presence of this thing that exists over their shoulders. You never go inside the camps. It's kind of more of an art piece of the absence of what's going on. I've seen people call this a profoundly evil movie, in both a good and a bad way, and obviously I lean on the good side. I think it is a fascinating piece of work, and in grappling with one of the greatest human atrocity that's ever happened. And it's like the performances are all fantastic. The sound design is truly incredible. It's top to bottom like a fantastic kind of like piece of construction, even if there is no plot, there is no kind of like standout scene of actors kind of like coming to a head and like really eating into kind of like dramatic lines and whatnot. Instead, it is just this pit of your stomach movie that just makes you queasy for the runtime.
Yeah, I wish I could agree or disagree with you on all these counts, but unfortunately, I cannot. There's really no good way to transition to another movie. But I do. This is not dealing with the same issues. But what I appreciate about my number 9 movie, which is American Fiction, is they are grappling with the very real issues, the real concerns of what it means to be black in America and what it means to be a black writer in America. And you get these kinds of movies, it feels like every so often. I've seen people compare this to Bamboozled, the Spike Lee movie that came out over 20 years ago at this point. And for me, I think American Fiction is really good at being a family drama, but it is also it's also really good as a commentary on what kind of stories do we get to read about? What kind of stories do we get to hear about? And I don't think that this movie is perfect in how it handles some things, but I appreciate the audacity of the ending, which I'm not going to spoil since Ben has not seen it. But if nothing else about this movie really strikes you, then Jeffrey Wright gives one of the best performances of the year, and it's unfortunate that his is going to get lost. I think with Cillian Murphy, with Paul Giamatti, with even Bradley Cooper from Maestro. But to me, I mean, this feels like the definitive Jeffrey Wright performance, and I think you get a lot of really good performances across the board. And I think part of the issue whenever you're talking about actors of color is, there's kind of this underrated quality because they don't always get to shine in these movies. But, you're talking about Tracy Ellis Ross, Erica Alexander, Sterling K. Brown. I mean, just some great supporting performances, and even Issa Rae playing a very different author as well. And, even someone like John Ortiz, who is a character actor who's been like in these very small roles, kind of playing these goofy villains. But I mean, he does a great job playing the agents of Thelonious Ellison. And there's just a lot of really good performances. And again, I think this movie is kind of messy in a lot of ways, but I was blown away by this. I was just blown away seeing this movie. And again, I mentioned I saw this in another movie that is in my top 10, and I'll talk about it later. But I mean, this movie just really, it grabbed me from the first moment. It's really well written. It's very compelling. And it's definitely one that I hope gets a lot of attention for awards consideration, because I think these are the kinds of stories that, even if it's messy, I think it's well worth discussing.
Yeah, Core Jefferson's someone I've got a lot of time for, where like his TV stuff has been. I don't think he's made a bad TV show or a TV show that I've not enjoyed that he's worked on, and so getting to see him kind of like stretch his muscles on a cinematic level is like really, really exciting. Super interested to see where he goes next. Obviously, he's most likely going to get a Best Picture nomination for his debut feature, and I think Jeffrey Wright's at this point more likely to get Best Actor nomination than Leonardo DiCaprio. So like this is truly like the little movie that could, since it premiered at Toronto. So super excited when this gets to come to UK cinemas in like early Feb, I think it is.
All right, Ben, your number 8.
My number 8, and possibly my most controversial movie on this entire list, although there might be one higher that is also equally controversial to people outside of this call. Beau is Afraid, the latest Ari Aster movie, which I thought was like truly, truly wonderful. I've come down a bit of it on my initial screening, but Ari Aster is just one of those filmmakers who like he just puts all of it out there in this movie, and Joaquin Phoenix is kind of like the perfect foil for him in this, where like he is able to shoulder basically anything that is thrown at him. It's a movie jam-packed full of fantastic performances. I adore Parker Posey in her late movie cameo in this. But you've also got like Patti LuPone, Amy Ryan, Nathan Lane, Richard Kind. It's really packed. It's another one of those like, is it a comedy? Is it like a horror? And it's kind of more of just a generalized anxiety attack of a movie, which is impossible to describe other than the fact it's kind of like the road trip from hell to go visit someone's mother, essentially.
So Beau is Afraid is not in my top 10. I don't even know where it's ranked. It would not exactly be at the top of the line for me. I really struggled with this. I really liked the first third of it. I basically hated the middle third, and then it kind of brought me back in the final third. So I had a really hard time with this movie, and I think Ari Aster is somebody. I think Hereditary is really good. I think the ending is kind of bad. Midsummer is one of my favorite movies of that year. I really liked it. I thought it delivered across the board. I don't know what happened with this one, but part of me wonders if this is a better 2-hour movie than a 3-hour movie. I think if this was 2 hours, I think I would be along for the ride much more. And I don't know how you construct it to be 2 hours, but it's that 3-hour runtime. And I look, I am not your former podcast partner. There are 2 3-hour movies. No, there are 3 3-hour movies on my top 10. But if Beau is Afraid was 2 hours, I think I would have liked it a lot more.
What's your number 8, Jerome?
My number 8 is Oppenheimer. And I think that there is a lot of hype about Barbenheimer and coming out together. And look, I'm not going to get into the debate about which is better. And, I think that the important thing is that I think these two movies benefited each other tremendously. And it's funny to think that thematically, like, there are a lot of striking similarities between the two. But just in terms of what Oppenheimer was able to accomplish, I think that this is a real triumph for Christopher Nolan. And he got a lot of heat for Tenet, not just because of the quality of Tenet, but also because of his insistence on releasing this movie during a pandemic. And I think that this is a very interesting follow-up just in terms of who Oppenheimer is. I think the fact that a 3-hour biopic could end up in IMAX and make $1 billion, I think is really impressive. It speaks to how good of a director Christopher Nolan is. And quite honestly, I think the performances across the board are really excellent. I think that when people think about this movie, I think they're going to think about the technical parts of it. And they're going to talk about like the sound design, which they should. But I mean, you look at the casting across the board here. It's really excellently cast. And even someone like Jason Clarke, who I think is best in these kind of character actor roles. I think he does a really good job of being a foil, and everybody talking about Robert Downey Jr. kind of coming back to getting away from kind of the Marvel apparatus, so to speak. But even for me, like Alden Ehrenreich, who I think a lot of people got to know him through Solo, for better and for worse. But he had a really good year, both with this and a Netflix movie that he did called Fair Play, which is not my top 10, but is very much worth seeing, and it was great to see him kind of shine in a couple of movies this year. So for me, Oppenheimer is number 8, and if it wins Best Picture, I am not going to be mad about it.
Yeah, it's number 14 on my list. I've seen it twice, both times in IMAX. Both times I've had like the flip problem of it, where like the first time I think the last hour was kind of like transcendent. I was like, wow, this is like really cooking in terms of like just paying off all of the structural stuff. And then the second time I was completely bowled over by the first 2 hours. I'm waiting for that screening where like the whole 3 hours works in one consistent go, and that's like the only reason I'm like, it's literally just outside. It's the top of my like not 4.5 5-star movies, and like if I get that transcendent screening, I can see this going to like the top 5 films of the year. I haven't had that like, yep, this is like completely 100% worked for me as a movie. But I agree with everything you say. Like below the line stuff is all fantastic. All the performances are kind of like uniformly excellent. Nolan should win Best Director for this, probably. Like I've got no issues with the awards run. It's literally just my personal kind of like, I wish I was getting the gut punch, or the kind of like this was coalescing entirely into a uniform thing for me.
I know that the Oscars really likes to spread it out now, and you don't get those like dominant runs. If even if this doesn't win Best Picture, this should sweep director and all the below the line stuff. This should have 7 or 8 Academy Awards by the end of the night.
Yeah, I think like 7, 8, 9 is kind of like where this is going to end up at. I think the thing that's going to hurt it fundamentally is it just doesn't have the sway in the acting categories to kind of push it to the record heights of an 11 win. But yeah, this is going to be an all-timer run, I think, at the Academy Awards.
All right, your number 7.
My number 7 was actually your number 10 last year. It is Babylon, which is, I just had the best time in this. I think I saw it like 5 days after we recorded our call last year. Damien Chazelle returning. I think it's better than La La Land. I think it is just a huge tribute to kind of like the cinematic gods. It's been very fun watching this year of kind of like, it got mixed reviews at the time last year, and I feel like all of this year has been kind of the Babylon Hive rising up, reclaiming this movie, everyone kind of complaining about how extra and how over the top it is, and how dark, and how it's kind of like riffing on one very obvious movie, and then they make the reference points explicit by the end of the movie. But I was just hooting and hollering the whole time. I think Margot Robbie in the first time they shoot sound scene is one of the funniest sequences of film of like the last 10 years for a movie that gets very dark. And then every so often I still will throw on either the soundtrack or that kind of like technological movie montage that ends the film and ends up with Avatar being the Avatar 2 being the second best Avatar movie of 2023 for me.
Pretty amazing. I mean, I don't want to repeat anything I said last year about Babylon, but just know that I agree with you, and I'm very glad the Babylon Hive has risen. All I'm going to say is, though, it feels like Saltburn has kind of become that movie, and I'm on the complete other side of it. It's very polarizing. It is the movie I hated the second most this year.
I don't think anyone who is actually on the Saltburn Hive is like on film Twitter. I think it's all I've seen it on is TikTok. Saltburn is the number one movie that I've had to talk to like regular people for like the last 2-3 months. It is even my partner who loved Saltburn has gotten sick of being like, does everyone only want to speak about Saltburn? Like, why is that the only movie when there are all these other good movies out? And like I've had yesterday, I was at the pub and someone turned to me and said, "So what didn't you like about Saltburn? Tell me what you didn't like about Saltburn." And I laid out my opinion on Saltburn, and they're like, "Oh, I hadn't actually thought about it like that. I just had a good time." So I think that's the difference between Babylon Hive and Saltburn Hive. Is I think Saltburn Hive is benefiting from it's on Amazon. Everyone is watching it because of the memes and the TikToks, whereas Babylon Hive is like genuine like cinephiles are pushing this up a hill. And what will be the core difference in 5-10 years time about the critical reevaluation of the movie?
Yeah, it's been really weird. I mean, you mentioned giving at the bar, and I had somebody who said they really like Saltburn, and I was like, I could do a TED talk during the movie about how much I hated it. But I would never do that because I am not that person. So let me talk about my number 7, which is Poor Things, a movie that I have to tell you, Ben, in the first 20 minutes, I was not feeling this movie at all. And it's once Mark Ruffalo comes on the screen, and nothing, not to take away from Emma Stone, because Emma Stone is transformative, I think, in this movie, just the way that her character evolves. And I think what this movie has to say about sex work is some of the most interesting dialogue about that job that I've ever heard. And I think it's really insightful. I think in terms of, I think people complained about kind of the simplicity of Barbie and its feminist ideals, and I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it I think it's at least going for something. It's trying for something. I think Poor Things is kind of an evolution of that. I think the movie is hilarious. It looks great, and I think it is a great follow up to The Favorite. And it's funny, like I wasn't super into The Lobster, but I really like The Favorite. And coming into this movie, I was like, okay, this is going to be a huge, like for me personally, this is a huge statement on Yorgos Lanthimos. And I have to say, the fact that this movie makes it into my top 10 means that I'm a fan, and I will definitely give him the benefit of the doubt moving forward, because I think that this movie is really excellent. And again, something else that kind of came late in the year and really stole the show for me. And I saw this and American Fiction and The Iron Claw on the same day, and two of those three made it into the top 10. And who would have thought it wasn't the wrestling one that made it?
At this point, it's more likely Iron Claw would be in my 10 than your 10, which is very interesting as a flip. Yeah, Poor Things is truly fantastic. Yorgos is kind of like at the top of his powers in this. He's someone who I need to like fill out a few of my final gaps on him, like kind of his Greek language stuff that he's done, because he's firmly now a kind of like US UK based director doing all of this stuff kind of all around Europe, and kind of like attracting all these huge actors. Like the cast of Poor Things is truly stacked. Like Mark Ruffalo doing transcendent work, Emma Stone is absolutely fucking phenomenal, Willem Dafoe, Rami Youssef, like you could go on and on in terms of how this movie like is cast, it looks, it sounds. I cannot believe that no one had thought of like Frankenstein Bildungsroman before in terms of like a fairy tale take on Victorian literature. It's truly kind of like just a fantastic synthesis of all of these things. Yeah, not enough good words can be said about Poor Things, really.
And I mean, then you're talking about kind of even the smaller performances, like Gerard Carmichael, I think, plays a great but small role in terms of what he's doing. You've got Margaret Qualley kind of playing the replacement for Bella back at the mansion. You've also got Christopher Abbott, like in the final 20 minutes of this movie, stealing the show in his own way. Just a lot of really good stuff across the board. What a great year for performances. I mean, if there was ever a year when you could do 10 to 15 nominations for each category, I mean, this is it. I mean, you could just about go to each of our top 10 and just say like 2 or 3 really great performances that deserve to be nominated.
Oh, I've got my entire like my top 5 movies, and I was literally with my partner the other night going like, I want to have room in my actor lineup for this person, but I also don't want to cut any of the 5 performances. It's really tough this year if you do kind of like play along in terms of like who you think are the best performances. I think supporting actress is maybe the weakest, and even then I love my 5 for that category.
I mean, and the thing is like there are a couple movies that are outside of my top 10 where I would probably want to have like 3 or 4 people nominated from it. Specifically, and I'll get into it later, but your number 6.
My number 6 then is Hayao Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron, another one I saw at LFF. No option to see the dub on this. I still have not seen Robert Pattinson's transcendent performance in this movie, but like when I saw the trailer and he was doing basically the exact same as the Japanese voice actor, I was just, oh god, they've done this completely correctly. This is a treatise on the career of one of our greatest directors, really. It is a melancholic kind of like reflection on his career, what he means, everything that matters to him. There's the nature stuff, there's the war stuff, there's just every single thing that matters to him as director, and fundamentally it's a movie about creativity, about family, about the ways in which what really fundamentally should matter more is family over creativity, and that if the things you created got burnt to the ground, it's not the end of the world. But also how there's instability in these kind of like flights of fancy that we do. It's a movie that I've seen people come away from and be, I have no idea what that happened. And then there are other people who are moved to tears by the abstract kind of nailing of emotions that is this, and I'm firmly on the side of that. I think it is not the crowning achievement of Miyazaki's career, but if this is going to be his final movie or his new final movie, then there really is almost no better way for him to end a long and storied career.
So I did a full Miyazaki run over the last year. So I literally have seen all of Miyazaki's movies in 2023. It's kind of been on the list of shame for me, but I walked away, and obviously he's got a lot of stone cold classics. And for me, The Wind Rises was the perfect way for him to go out. And I would have to say, I don't think The Boy and the Heron is as good as The Wind Rises, but certainly it is very good, and it's a movie that I definitely need to see a second time before coming to a full opinion. So on my list, I have it as number 28, but I still think that it was still really good just because it's number 28. I mean, I still gave it a solid 4 stars. I think it's still really good, but I definitely struggle with certain aspects of it. But Robert Pattinson's performance is transformative. It's really good. And I think that just take away everything else, and it's kind of cliche to mention this, but the look of this movie alone makes this worthwhile. Like, even if the plot doesn't work, even if nothing else about this is a distinctive looking movie, and it feels like Miyazaki is telling his son to stop making movies. That's one of the messages I took away from this movie.
I did indeed go home after this movie to watch the CGI atrocity that Goro directed a few years ago, and indeed I also was like, Goro, you need to stop directing movies. This is not the career for you fundamentally. But hey ho, we move on from this. Jerome, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is The Holdovers. So I am not a huge Alex Payne person. So I went into this because I'm a huge fan of Paul Giamatti. I was very, just thematically, like, you're talking about a movie about a teacher. I am a teacher. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And I went in, and right from the time that they showed like the old school focus features, like 1970s credit, I was like, okay, we're going for something here. And just the design of it, the look of it, I mean, this literally felt like something that could come out in 1970. And that is a high compliment. This movie is spectacular. Again, we've talked so much about performances. Paul Giamatti as Paul Hunnam, I mean, he's great. I think that these movies are kind of cliche, right? You've got the bitter teacher who kind of softens up. But the thing that I appreciate about this movie specifically is that, yes, Paul does kind of warm up to his students a little bit, but it doesn't feel unnatural. It doesn't feel like this is something that feels like he's gone the complete other way and is just a really nice person. Like, he is still able to maintain the integrity of the character, even with what happens at the end. Dominic Sessa making his debut in this. He is really great. I know people have talked about Divine Joey Randolph, who I first saw in High Fidelity, the TV show, and was massively impressed with and really liked her performance in that. She's really good in this too. So those three performances are excellent, and really those are the 3 primary ones. And yeah, I was bowled over by The Holdovers. This is a movie that I could see myself watching every holiday season moving forward. It is a Christmas movie, but it can also be kind of an anti-Christmas movie too.
Yeah, I got to watch this on Boxing Day in the cinema. They brought us a mince pie and like a little thing of mulled wine, and it was kind of the perfect way to watch this movie. It's not in my 10. It's kind of at 27 on my list. Not to say, again, that I don't absolutely adore this thing. The performances are all fantastic, as you said. Giamatti is my pick for Best Actor this year. It's just one of those ones where, again, I think I was just lacking that, like, the kind of like the shifts over the course of the movie kind of like led me to kind of like wax and wane with kind of like how much it was going to go. But by the end, I was like fully invested in these kind of three deeply sad characters and them trying to find some semblance of peace in their lives. But also, this is like the number one movie that people have come to me this year and gone like, oh God, the Holdovers trailer looks awful. Do I really have to go see it for award stuff? And I'm kind of like, you will really like it. Like, it is genuinely very funny, very heartwarming.
The
It is
trailer does a tremendous disservice to this movie. I think the
yeah,
trailer is just flat out bad.
yeah, and that is the thing where it's like you're fighting an uphill battle with this one, where everyone's like, oh, I don't really want to go see it. This one feels like the kind of eating your vegetables of award season this year, and I don't think they're really like Maestro is the closest to that of all the movies that are in kind of contention for Best Picture. Holdovers most definitely isn't because it's funny. Giamatti's doing tremendous physical stuff with this performance. I hope someday they reveal how they did the lazy eye trick and just the amount of hats they make that character's poor shitty life kind of like have to wear, where you're just like, oh, this can't possibly get any worse, and then they add on like another physical defect that this character has. It is just lovely as a film.
Yeah, I think this movie and American Fiction just that they like scratch a very particular itch for me personally, and I think that's one of the reasons that I see these two movies perhaps a little bit higher than some others. Again, being a teacher myself, never wanting to aspire to be Paul from the Holdovers, but also, looking at the issues of, what kind of Black stories are being told in the classroom. I mean, those two movies specifically for me are always going to scratch a very particular itch. And when we get into the top five, boy, what an eclectic top five I have. So let's get into yours first, though, Ben. What is your number five?
We're actually doing a repeat. My number 5 was your number 7. Poor Things. Yeah, I saw this like 2 days ago. I could have seen it at London Film Festival, but I had to go to a friend's wedding. I then missed the opportunity to get tickets to see it kind of like last year at another screening, which would have had Yorgos and Emma Stone kind of like do a little bit of preamble. But I finally got to see it the other day, and because of the situation with Hitman, I was like, no, I'm sticking this on my list. I absolutely adored this. It's my favorite Yorgos. We've done this to death. So yeah, number 5. Poor Things. What's your number 5, Jerome?
John Wick 3. This is for me the best of the John Wick movies, or I'm sorry, John Wick 4. And I kind of struggled with John Wick 3 in a lot of ways, and I was like, is there enough juice? Is there enough to do a fourth one? And then I heard this movie was 2 hours and 50 minutes, and I was like, I don't know. And I have to say, I was consistently entertained for 2 hours and 50 minutes. I think there's maybe a little bit of a lull in the middle, but the final 45 minutes of this movie just works in spectacular fashion. The scene with Wick on the stairs and just that whole sequence, I think that is what pushes this into the top 10 for me and makes this the best of the 4 John Wick movies. And what a successful franchise it's been, from where it started to where it is now to where it is kind of having multiple spin-offs. And I'm not sure how I feel about that necessarily, but if this were to be the last John Wick, I would be very, very satisfied. But I really, really like this a lot. And I don't unlike Holdovers, I don't have a personal connection to this one. I've never had to fight and survive my way through the streets of Paris. But Keanu Reeves is really, really good, and he looks so tired, man. And I hope he gets to rest. I hope he gets to maybe take a break from the action for a little bit and do something else, because he really earned it. John Wick 4 is my number 5.
This was my number 11. My favorite of the John Wicks as well. Fantastic supporting performances from like Donnie Yen, Rina Sawayama, Bill Skarsgård. Like, just it's packed to the gills. It's probably the best action movie since, I want to say, like The Raid. So like in 12 years or so. So close to making my list. Just sadly, I had to fit on a few more kind of like prestige dramas rather than just fun action films. But yeah, like I fully commend you having this in your top 5.
All right, so I have a profoundly weird choice for number 4, but I want to hear about yours first.
My number 4 is a movie that I don't think anyone's really talking about this year. It's Killers of the Flower Moon. Some guy called
A
Martin
movie that I will
Scorsese.
have a lot to say about later.
A movie from one of our great directors, Martin Scorsese, tackling the book by David Graham. It is transformative of that book, which is far more of a standard kind of police procedural in how it's structured. Obviously, there are insert parts afterwards that kind of like put the modern context into what's going in. But what Scorsese does here is he focuses it in on Molly Burkhart, played by Lily Gladstone, who is my like number one performance of the year. I think she is truly stupendous in this film. And then also just the banality of evil. It's very similar to Zone of Interest in that same way, where it's a movie that makes you exist in a world in which people are doing terrible things in unapologetic ways. This is not a movie which tries to like give you a sympathetic view of these people. It just says like they're doing this because they're selfish, they're evil, they are like just doing these awful things to these native people. Yeah, like the fact that Martin Scorsese is still like doing this kind of stuff so near to the end of his like long and storied career and still able to put out total masterpieces truly says something. I do agree with the general kind of consensus that like there maybe could have been a little bit more for foregrounding of Gladstone, but it also like if you give her more to do, you kind of take away from just how much of this movie is just beating you down into just living in how evil the things that these people are and who they and how evil they are themselves.
I agree with everything you said. I have more to say, but I'm going to say it later, if that's okay.
That's okay. So what's your number 4? A movie which I feel is more likely to be on my 10 than your 10. So this is very interesting.
So my number 4 movie of the year is Bottoms. And this is a movie that I am absolutely stunned is on my top 10. Like, I watched this movie. I had a complete and utter blast with it. And I think that you saw a number of comedies this year that I think really brought the genre back into prominence. I think about No Hard Feelings, which is not on my list. I just think this movie is spectacular. And what else can I say about Iowa Darby that hasn't been said a million times? I think she's great on the bear. She does a great voiceover in the Ninja Turtles movie. She's excellent in this movie. I was laughing from beginning to end. And I have to say, one of the most underrated movies that I've ever seen is Better Off Dead. I never thought that another movie would be able to capture that energy. This movie does that in spades. What a wonderful movie that not enough people have seen. I don't know if it's still $5 on Amazon or Apple, but you should. I mean, look, you should watch all of these movies, but some of these movies, quite honestly, can feel like you're eating the vegetables. This will not be that. This was wonderful. This was hilarious. 91 minutes, and you're going to be laughing for like 85 of them. And I don't know, would Marshawn Lynch have made your best supporting actor list, Ben?
No, sadly not. My best supporting actor list is kind of made up of all the obvious people, and then I threw Bradley Cooper in there as in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 because I think that is a truly fantastic performance in that movie. Bottoms is a movie that I had like a great time with. I think Emma Seligman is kind of like a fantastic talent who needs to be paid attention to. I did slightly prefer Shiva Baby. I think it's just a little bit more anxiety driven and I could empathize with it a little bit more than Bottoms because I am not a high school student, not a lesbian, and I've never been in a fight club.
Look, all I'm gonna say is I have never done any of those things either,
but yeah, Ayo Edebiri is like, if anyone has had like a fantastic year, I feel like it's her. Like, she is in so many movies, in one of the most popular shows on television, has one of the most endearing Letterboxd presence. I've been aware of her since she was on a Blank Check episode like 5 years ago and was like, who is this like ray of sunshine? And to to watch her progress up the industry into a level of being kind of like one of the next great breakout celebrities. If you don't follow her on Letterboxd and have a Letterboxd account, please do that. She doesn't score things anymore, but the reviews are still fantastic. Her latest one was a bit on The Departed, in which she was the dialogue coach in The Departed, and then it devolves into an entire bit around how did you do this, Io? You were only 6 years old when The Departed came out. Yeah, truly wonderful stuff. Bottoms is worth it just for Io's best performance of the year outside of television.
For sure. So, two very different movies for our number four. Let's see what our number three looks like.
My number three is, I feel like, potentially controversial. I think this is the best film that this director has done in a long and storied career, which is often painted as being very samey, who went massively viral in the middle of this year for people doing bad impersonations of his style on TikTok and Instagram. I'm talking about Wes Anderson's Asteroid City. This movie was like a real kind of like punch to the gut. It was like I don't always get like super emotionally invested in the Wes Anderson movies, but then when they do, I'm just like, yeah, like he is one of our best working directors. He has a visual style unlike anyone else, a comedic style unlike anyone else. The cast of this movie is absolutely fucking stacked. I think Jason Schwartzman gives the best performance of his entire career. Margot Robbie kills it for like a 2-second cameo. Scarlett Johansson is wonderful. Tom Hanks, Jeffrey Wright, Tilda Swinton. Like you get to like 15 people down into the Wes Anderson credits and you're still naming people who like had a distinct impact on that movie. Like I could talk for literal hours about Rupert Friend and Maya Hawke's romance whilst they're teaching school students to like music and stuff like that. Like it's a movie that I just completely adore, and it's one that I feel has been picked up by film Twitter and then kind of like completely abandoned by like almost anyone else who watches movies, and just kind of view it as a shrug and kind of like just another minor key Wes Anderson movie. And I feel like that's where you're at in terms of your perception on it.
See, it's weird. Like, I am so up and down on Wes Anderson. Like, there's some Wes Anderson movies that I absolutely love. I'm looking at you, Royal Tenenbaums. I'm looking at Grand Budapest Hotel. Like, these are movies that I love. They would be like in my top 10 for those individual years. And there's even some Wes Anderson movies that I still really like. I like The French Dispatch. I know people are kind of mixed on it, but I think that's very much a vibes movie and I just vibed along with it. I did not vibe along with Asteroid City at all. And it's weird because I watched the trailer and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm going to be super into this. And I wasn't at all. I could not get invested in this movie. Maybe I need to watch it a second time, but it's weird. Like, I just wasn't into this at all. And I don't know what it is. Like I said, there is no director that I am more up and down on than Wes Anderson, which is ironic because people say that he does the same thing over and over again. But I am just like, it's very up or down. Like, there are some movies where I'm like, this is one of the best things I've seen all year. And there's other things where I'm like, this is boring, or this is not good. So yeah, I was not into Asteroid City at all. So do you have any other? I want you to have the last word because this is, we are in the top 5. So say more nice things about it before we move on.
It's hard. It is a movie that just kind of like fully worked for me. I don't know if it was the. I was on the emotional wavelength for it, but I do want to ask, which is Wes Anderson did 4 Roald Dahl adaptations this year as well for Netflix, and had you seen those at all?
See, I don't know what it is. I really like those. Felt like the perfect. Like, I appreciated the fact that they were shorts. I think those worked a lot better than Asteroid City did.
So you've seen all 4 of those?
Yes, I watched all 4 of them, and yeah, I was very much. I mean, I'm not going to say they're all perfect, but just in terms of overall, I would say I really appreciated what he was going for and really doing something a little bit different. Like, it was very Wes Anderson-y, but it still felt like this was the perfect format. Like, I did not need to see this in a movie theater. I don't think this would work as like a 90-minute like cavalcade of short films. I think the way that it was formatted on Netflix was perfect.
Yeah, I do agree. I think the Swan was my favorite of those, but also it's just my realization that like Wes Anderson might be the perfect director to adapt Roald Dahl, who is obviously a deeply problematic and controversial person in terms of like his opinions around like just obesity and around Jewish people and whatnot. But there is something that obviously he is deeply, deeply talented, and these kind of like 30-year removed from his death adaptations, and the fact that Wes Anderson has now done, I think, Wonderful World of Henry Sugar is fantastic. The Swan is fantastic. Fantastic Mr. Fox is fantastic. I don't I don't see any other director doing these things as well as what he's doing. I don't watch the Matilda movie, not the Danny DeVito one, the musical that came out last year, and kind of get the same jolt of like a creative who is working on the same level as his source material. And I really hope that Wes Anderson has like another feature length or even more, just adapting kind of like Roald Dahl short stories, because obviously he has a huge output of these short stories out there that could easily be adapted as well. But yeah, like Wes Anderson is so firmly in this kind of like, he just is cranking these movies out that are all so intricate and so well thought out, and I'm just really excited to see everything that kind of like he's got coming out. And I know he's got like his next movie is in production or like coming like very, very soon, and I'm just very happy to see that he's just at this kind of like one every 3-year clip or whatever it is.
Yeah, I would certainly agree that we are better off for having Wes Anderson, but I mean, it's just, again, I think you're very much into what he's doing or you're not, and I think that's even where I come down sometimes. So my number 3, technically only half a movie. There were a lot of part ones. Many of them were bad. In the case of Rebel Moon, maybe they were historically bad, but I'm talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which unfortunately had some controversy because of some of the treatment of the animators, kind of soiling this movie a little bit. But shockingly, this movie made so much more than the first one, and the first one was by no means a bomb, but it really feels like this captured the imagination of the movie going public in the way that the first one did not. I would say that this is easily the best superhero movie of the year, and that's, with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, that's not an easy thing to say, but I think what this movie does is wonderful, and really evolving the character, getting to see even more Spider-Man. Just the emotional core of this movie really works. And I know that everybody is tired of multiverse stuff, but I think the way that the multiverse material is handled here is really good. And then, you get this prologue of Gwen, her relationship with her father, that I think works out really well. And I think that, like, that in some ways is what elevates this movie into being something even bigger and better. And, special shout out to Haley Steinfeld as Gwen, and Shea Whigham, who we're not going to get another chance to talk about Shea Whigham, but can we talk about how great Shea Whigham was this year?
Oh, he's so good in Mission Impossible, so good in this. Am I missing another performance from him this year that really stuck out?
No, I mean, he was in Righteous Gemstones as well, which obviously isn't a movie, but I mean, he's so good. And Mission Impossible, he is probably his most notable, but his work here is also excellent. I mean, you've got the returning Shamik Moore, who I think does a great job as Miles. What a great use of the spot. And it's funny, Brian and I, when we did our discussion of the 1994, the Fox Kids animated series, we talked about Spot and kind of how pointless of a character Spot was, but what a great use of him in this movie and that entire sequence. There's just individual sequences in this movie that stand out. And it's not just actiony. There's also, again, like I said, an emotional core to this movie. I think Oscar Isaac, I mean, this is probably the best superhero thing he's ever done, right?
What are you talking about? There's X-Men Apocalypse, which is a true standout in that franchise. And then he's probably done something else, but I cannot think of it.
Moon Knight? How dare you forget Moon Knight?
Go listen to Ben and Matt's Marvelous Journey if you want to hear a kind of 2-hour takedown of why Moon Knight doesn't work as a television show. God. Yeah,
probably one of my favorite episodes you've ever done was about Moon Knight. I enjoyed that podcast far more than I did the actual show.
we were just pulling our hair out by the end of that record. But yeah, Oscar Isaac is real good in this. I'm glad he finally got to play kind of like a solid character. I don't love this movie as much as I love Into the Spider-Verse, which I think was my favorite animated film of the 2010s. So it might have been kind of like coming with lofty expectations for what this movie was going to be. I agree with everything you said in terms of like this movie is visually stunning. I think Haley Steinfeld is truly fantastic and was on my supporting actress ballot as well for like a good chunk of this year. There is just something about it does the smart thing of structuring it as a part one around Gwen Stacy, which I think is like thumbs up, the correct thing to do. You give us a act one, act two, act three kind of like journey for her character, but fundamentally it's still Miles' story, and that is incomplete at the point of the end of act one. And I'm withholding part of my judgment for when part two finally gets to drop. Obviously, as far as anyone is saying behind the scenes, they only got this across the line kind of like a few weeks before release and was still tinkering with it when it was in cinemas, and none of the cast has recorded any lines of dialogue for this film yet.
Yeah, so we're not sure when we're going to get a third one, but for me, I mean, this was again a huge triumph, and in terms of the creativity, just a wonderful piece of work. Not my favorite animated movie of 2023, though, if you can believe it. But Ben, number two, what's your number two?
My number two is a movie that was on your 2022 list at number 8, because I got to watch this on like January 8th last year. And yeah, we're talking Tar. We're talking Cate Blanchett in her biopic of everyone's favorite real composer, Lydia Tarr.
This is the sequel. I guess Maestro was a prequel to this, right?
Yes, yeah, because obviously Lydia Tarr is the kind of like the greatest student of Leonard Bernstein, and so this is basically dramatizing the downfall of Lydia Tarr over the course of kind of like a very kind of like troubled last few years of her career before she ran away to Asia to compose for video game concerts. Which the greatest final scene of any movie. I can't say that. My number one's got an even better one, but the end of this movie with the Monster Hunter concert reveal is truly chef's kiss.
I was like, why has this movie ended yet? Like, I was very not into it, and then it paid off, and I was like, never mind, I was wrong. This rules. Stop. Unbelievable.
I had to text my podcast co-host Matt Waters and be like, do you know what the ending of this movie is? You will never watch it because it's a 2.5 hour long, like slow, methodical kind of like look at classical film world. But I need you to know how this movie ends because it is truly insane. And like,
I mean, it's honestly worth the 2.5 hours just for the ending. Like, if you enjoy no other part of this movie, the ending is worth it.
Yeah, I mean, Cate Blanchett is obviously like truly transcendent in this. Todd Field, we need you to direct more movies. He is truly the kind of heir apparent to Stanley Kubrick in terms of just how like clockwork this movie is composed. I'm deeply sad he's only done 3 movies. I have not actually seen I've not seen Little Children. I've seen In the Bedroom. So I'm very much looking forward to kind of like completing that filmography. But yeah, I really hope he doesn't keep doing one movie every 20 years or however it ends up being, because Tar is something really, really special, even in things that kind of like feel like everything feels so like perfectly calibrated. Like you've got the scene where she's talking down to the student who kind of like uses the very Gen Z millennial kind of like buzzwords to talk about oppression and their own self-identity. And I've seen people take that scene the wrong way, and it's like, no. The whole point is Lydia Tarr's a fucking moron, and isn't actually like the genius that she kind of like wants to present herself to be, and the hubris of this downfall. Tar, truly wonderful. I'm sad it's been like a year since I've seen it. I probably should just throw it on at some point soon and watch it again because really, really good.
I mean, this conversation is making me want to turn Tar on again because it's great. I mean, it's so good. I mean, it was my number 8, but I mean, it's a must watch in my view, just because the granularity of it, the performance of Cate Blanchett, those are the things that really stand out. I mean, this is not a movie that has like 10 good performances. Not to say that anyone's bad, but this is very much a Cate Blanchett's movie, and yeah, we need more discourse about this movie. The memes were out, and even started to come back when Maestro came out, and I guess that was kind of a good thing. Calling it a prequel to Tar was funny, but people just need to watch Tar. It's so good.
They do. Now, Jerome, defend your number 2.
Why would I have not attacked? I did not like Bo's Afraid. I did not attack Asteroid City. Why do I have to defend my number 2 selection?
I really like this movie. I adore the graphic novel that this movie is based on. I like in a world with some of the animated movies that came out this year, I just struggle to see someone being like, yes, the BlueSky knockoff that Netflix resurrected is the best animated movie of 2023. So I just want to.
I mean, if I'm looking at the animation, I mean, it does not compare to something like The Boy and the Heron. Like the animation is much better in Across the Spider-Verse. It's much better even in something like Suzume, which I know you are not as hot on as I was. But I think the story is what really makes this movie work for me. And I mean, this is a movie that Disney tried to kill because there is a queer relationship kind of at the center of it. And, this is a movie I actually rewatched this pretty recently just to make sure that this was indeed going to be my number 2. It is indeed my number 2, Nimona, which you can watch on Netflix. And again, I think the animation is definitely the weakest part of this movie. And it's one of the reasons that I would not put this as my number 1. But I think the story of this, I think it's told really well. I think it has a lot of emotion to it. And I compare this to something like Wish, which I don't know whether that's fair or not. But when I compare this to something like Wish, you just feel the heart. And I think you feel the emotions so much better in this movie. And that's why it's my number 2. And I see it's weird. I feel like this is definitely a movie that is not as beloved as some of the others, but in terms of animation specifically, but I fell in love with this movie in a way that I was not expecting to, and maybe that's part of it. Some of these other animated movies, I walked in with expectations, and this one I didn't, and I really liked it.
Have
But
you read?
I will say, and I've not read the graphic novel.
Yeah, I was going like
I will
that
say
was.
though, it's been a hell of a year for animation. I mean,
Yeah.
I look at my top 30. I mean, the Ninja Turtles movie is in my top 30. I mean, I think that movie is also really good. Suzume is my number 15. What a year for animation, just overall.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at my animation, like Boy and the Heron, Spider-Verse, Puss in Boots, technically kind of like a very late 2022, early 2023 release. I don't know if you saw the first Slam Dunk, the kind of like the anime movie based around a like high school basketball team, is truly really fucking good. As you said, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Marcel was like a middle release for you guys last year, but came out in the UK in like March of this year. Yeah, like for as much as kind of like Elementals, Mario, and Wish kind of like took the air out of the room for animation, it's been a really fucking good year for animation, and I think all of it is reacting to what Spider-Verse did a few years ago and letting a lot of these mainstream animation studios push the boat out a little bit in terms of their aesthetics. And even Nimona is that a little bit. Like, you can tell this was supposed to be BlueSky's response to Spider-Man, and instead it ends up kind of like in the Netflix animation studio area and probably has less money funding it than if it had been a Fox or a Disney kind of project. But it still does look really nice. And then just close off, I think like you really should read the graphic novel that it's based on. Andy Stevenson, who was the original creator of it, it's originally done as almost a webcomic style thing, where like each page or each kind of couple of pages is a short kind of like vignette that eventually blossoms into this kind of like long story. And obviously the movie has to do a lot of work to give more weight and more backstory and more kind of like structure to the whole thing. But as a work of kind of like independent comics, Nimona is like really, really lovely and has all of the kind of the same themes, the same queerness, the same visual panache that the movie has.
I think it's funny that Bottoms and Nimona are on my list, and they're not on your list. It's really weird how that turned out.
I'm a bad
All right,
gay.
number 1. Your number 1.
My number one was a movie that I don't think was in your 10 last year, but I feel I was hovering around just on the outside. It's another
It
masterwork.
was definitely an honorable mention for sure.
Yeah, it's another kind of like late career masterpiece from one of the true masters of cinema. Um, it's The Fablemans by Steven Spielberg. I really like kind of like 21st century Steven Spielberg, but this for me is the best movie he's done since AI. The fact that he's gone through this entire storied career and finally come up with this kind of like revealing all of the shit, like the fact that this is how he's going to reveal what exactly happened between his with the relationship with his mum and his dad, and how that kind of like paints the images of his early movies. Like the fact that you think you watch those early Spielberg movies and it's got such kind of like divorced dad energy where like it's searching for a father, and then you watch this and you realize the actual like the more turmoiled relationship was the one with his mother. And it's I don't think anyone could have, like, obviously this is a story that's deeply personal to Spielberg, but like just all of the little tiny touches are just proof that he is truly one of the best. Like the scene when the parents are kind of like revealing to the children that they're going to get divorced, and the son is like on the stairs reacting to it, but at the same time he's watching himself in the mirror thinking about how he would film it all, is one of the most dark kind of like points where like he can only see the world through this film camera now. And I love that darkness to like how Spielberg is like, yes, I acknowledge that I'm kind of like preternaturally good at where I put cameras, how I move the camera around, but like this creates this disconnect between how I perceive emotion and people and stuff like that, because I'm just constantly thinking in this way that was like, oh, I can make you look like the most powerful being in the universe right now, and instead I have to have a conversation with you. Yeah, like really good. And as I said, like the final scene with David Lynch playing John Ford is absolutely fantastic. And then the final walking away into the studios, which if you've not seen and not heard what the joke is, go away and like watch the whole David Lynch sequence of this movie, because it is wonderful. Yeah. If this ends up being Spielberg's kind of like final stab at prestige filmmaking, then good. It's truly wonderful.
I have to say, after watching Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I was like, you know what? I'm glad we got to meet the Fablemans instead. Because at first I was like to me, it felt like he's doing Fablemans instead of Indiana Jones. And it's like, I mean, I understood the decision. I was like, if you have everything you said, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull wasn't very good. If you're going to do this very personal movie instead, this is a movie that I really liked. It was not in my top 10. It's definitely in my honorable mentions. I will echo a lot of what you said. I think that just the way the feeling of filmmaking itself, I think is really good. But Ben, what if Spielberg went to therapy instead?
I mean, I'm sure he's in therapy, but this was obviously a therapeutic thing for him to do. But then I think there's a lot of filmmakers out there that probably should be in therapy, but then we don't get good art. And obviously it's a catch-22, because obviously you get some people who they can channel all of that into great art, and it actually works out all right, and they don't abuse people on set. But obviously it's also an industry where there are people who channel their abuse and their trauma into their art, and then also abuse people whilst on set, and that is a net negative for this as an art form. And I'm sure some great mind out there will be able to like thread the needle and create kind of like a great treatise on this. And Spielberg feels like he's kind of the closest to doing that so far.
So
It helps.
and
It
I
helps that people say he's a nice person.
Yeah, I think so. One of the cool things for me in seeing this was, so because of the nature of the wonky release schedule, I happened to see this at a big theater in a prominent Illinois suburb where there is a large Jewish population. So the theater I saw with, I was literally surrounded by a lot of Jewish people, and I knew they were Jewish people because they were wearing yarmulkes. So this definitely felt like an event movie because of that, and I think it made for a better in theater experience. But yeah, Meet the Fablemans is really good, and the fact that we have gotten Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg obviously coming to the end of their careers, but still throwing those fastballs and still really making good movies. I mean, it's impressive. My number one, also made by a cinematic master. It is Killers of the Flower Moon. And look, I think this is a movie that is very complicated to talk about for a number of reasons. I think there is a lot of legitimate criticism being made by the indigenous communities and by the Osage individuals as well. And I think that that has to be addressed when you're talking about this movie, because the history of the United States cannot be told without speaking about the genocide of so many indigenous people, and then the indigenous people that were not murdered, what happened to them, being forced to go to Oklahoma and less desirable places. I mean, that has to be addressed. And I think Martin Scorsese did the best job he could. Does that mean that would I want to see this story told again from the Osage perspective, directed, written by an Osage individual? Absolutely. But I think that in terms of the person to tell this story, because Martin Scorsese has tried to tell this story of greed and capitalism, and I think people have kind of misread it and misinterpreted it, and they've got lost in the entertainment and the pacing and the dollies and all that good stuff. And it just feels like The Irishman and this, Scorsese is kind of underlining the points that he is trying to make about American life and just how awful and evil capitalism is. And I think it also says a lot that, he has collaborated with Leonardo DiCaprio in a number of movies. He's collaborated with Robert De Niro in a number of movies. And it's this one where he kind of puts them both together. I think that says a lot as well. And I know it's really easy to make fun of a lot of De Niro's choices, both in movies and in his personal life, but what a great performance by him. I think Lily Gladstone is justifiably getting a lot of credit for and what she is doing. I think she absolutely should win the Oscar, and if she doesn't, it's a true injustice. But I also have to say that this is one of the best performances by Robert De Niro that I've seen in a long time as well. And of course, Leonardo DiCaprio is really good. And Jesse Plemons is really good. I mean, this movie is just spectacular. And I walked out of the theater thinking this was my favorite and best movie of the year. And I still think that. And again, I don't think that the criticisms are illegitimate. And and I've read so much about this movie and listened to so much about this movie. But for me, this just feels like another Martin Scorsese classic, and it's very different. The Irishman and this are both very different from some of his previous work, and it just feels like he's on a very interesting run right now. And I'm interested to see what his next movie is, because apparently it's another movie about Jesus Christ, which I'm sure will not stir any controversy whatsoever. But for me, Killers of the Flower Moon, in terms of, despite the flaws, I still think this is a spectacular movie. And I am not somebody who is all in favor of every movie being 3 hours and 26 minutes, but this is a movie that earned the right to be 3 hours and 26 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some people just like to complain about the length of movies and all the rest of it. And it's just, you're kind of funding these movies by going to see things like Avengers Endgame and Oppenheimer. You're proving that people actually do like 3-hour movies. Even if you complain about them, those are the only things you're seeing. There are lots of 90-minute movies. There are lots of like 120 just under minute movies. Let's not make length the source of the discourse here, especially when the 3-hour movies this year are by some of our greatest working directors who have proven that they can do whatever they like. And then obviously what Jesus movie is 70 minutes long is what
I love that he's gonna make an 80-minute movie. I mean, I think that's fun. The one thing I will also say is The problem is it's 3 hour movies. It's 2.5 hour movies that should be either 2 hours or 3 hours. That's
Yes.
the problem.
And again, they're always the top 10 highest grossing movies of the year, are all of those kind of movies. I saw Killers of the Flower Moon on like one of the most jam-packed days of LFF for me, where I literally started the day at 12 p.m. with Killers of the Flower Moon, followed it up with Boy and the Heron, followed it up with All of Us Strangers, and then ended the day with like a 10 p.m. screening of Ferrari. That was a lot of sitting in like one seat for the entire day, but also might be one of the greatest days for movies that I've ever had in my life, just in terms of like just how good across the board all four of those are. And yeah, that was my end of it. But yeah, Kills of the Flower Moon. There is a different world where this could have been my number one. Maybe if the UK releases were different, if I didn't love Asteroid City, then Kills of the Flower Moon would probably be my number one, and we'd have the same number one, which I think would be the first time ever you and I have been aligned quite like that since Parasite.
For sure. But what a year in movies. We do have a little bit of extra time, so let's get into some honorable mentions. Maybe look at your list of 11 through 25. I'll let you go first. For all your top 10. So I'm going to do some of my honorable mentions, and maybe that'll give you some time to think. So I'm going to start with The Color Purple. This is a movie that is a remake of Spielberg and is a musical. They tried to hide the fact that it was a musical, but there are some excellent performances in this movie. I have conflicting feelings about some of the non-singing parts, but Fantasia Barrino and Danielle Brooks both deserve to be nominated. Taraji P. Henson and Coleman Domingo are also really good, as are Halle Berry and Corey Hawkins. I mean, just across the board, the performances are also really good. And it was also great to see Louis Gossett Jr. again as well. Rye Lane, a movie that was streaming on Hulu, I thought was really good. Ben, I'm not sure that Air necessarily would be something you would enjoy, but it's a great dad movie. Past Lives, which I'm surprised it wasn't in either of our top tens because it's got a lot of buzz also there. Suzume, Mission Impossible, Barbie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Godzilla -1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, Eileen. Have you seen Eileen, Ben?
I've not seen Eileen.
Oh, yeah, I wonder if Eileen would have made your top 10. What an interesting movie that is.
Okay.
So those are my honorable mentions, kind of 11 through 21.
Okay. I'm gonna basically reel off a whole load of stuff that we've not talked about. So like if either of us have mentioned it, it's not on there, but it's kind of like in that contention. Just under Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is a movie kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 Volume 3 is a movie I kind of like really, really love this year. My favorite superhero movie of the year. Magic Mike's Last Dance is what I think a movie that is actually going to get reclaimed in the same way that Magic Mike XXL did. I think Soderbergh is kind of like at the top of his game here. I think it's a secret masterpiece from him, even if a lot of people kind of like dismissed it out of hand. I think it's a fantastic romance movie. I think Tatum and Salma Hayek have got like fantastic chemistry. The entire final like last dance sequence is truly wonderful, and the first dance at the top of the movie between Tatum and Salma Hayek is again absolutely transcendent. Probably my hottest take of the year is having that movie so close to being in my like top 10. Evil Does Not Exist, the new Ryosuke Hamaguchi movie, is absolutely fantastic. Kind of like another version of kind of like an eco thriller slash kind of like capitalism is bad movie, so definitely one to watch there. I don't know if it's out in the US or even got a release scheduled, but like definitely After Drive My Car and all of Hamaguchi's other movies definitely want to check out. The new Koreeda movie Monster, which is a triptych of kind of like a bunch of school children kind of dealing with kind of like bullying and abuse allegations that kind of like morphs into something very, very different, is also really, really wonderful. And both of those kind of cap off an actually really, really transcendent year for Japanese cinema, where you have Boy and the Heron, you have Evil Does Not Exist, you have Monster, you have I forget what the Japanese submission is for Best Picture, but it's the new Wim Wenders movie. It was filmed entirely in Japan, and then Godzilla -1 obviously shown that they can do blockbusters at the same time. All really, really good. I love The Killer. I love Passages. Speaking of like queer narratives from this year, I love the new Christian Petzold movie A Fire, which is another one in the long run for him where he's just kind of like knocking them out of the park. Priscilla, Mission Impossible, Knock at the Cabin, All of Us Strangers. It's a really good year for movies last year, especially on like an international level. Like there were so many good kind of like movies not in English last year that I feel bad for how weighted towards the English language my top 10 was.
Yeah, I mean, Suzume and Godzilla -1. You mentioned the wonderful year for Japanese cinema, and those are two movies that also were in my honorable mentions. So I would certainly agree with you there. So yeah, that's the year in movies. Any really bad movies you want to mention?
My least favorite
I
movie
don't
of
want
the
to do
year.
a worst of list, but
I'll do my bottom 10 real quick, just like running through it very quickly. Wish, Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, Empire of Light, Little Mermaid, Flash, Five Nights at Freddy's, Nick's Goal Wins, Fast X, Best Christmas Ever, Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire, and then bottom of the barrel is Meg 2, which got the coveted I half-starred and liked it because I think it's shocking to me that Ben Wheatley is seen as a respected filmmaker because that thing is like fucking incompetent, but also it's a hell of a lot of fun, and I think it's that kind of like that right line of it's goofy fun but also badly made, so it kind of tips itself into being so bad it's good territory.
my bottom 10: Ghosted, which you probably didn't know exists, and it's probably for the best. Saltburn, God, I hate that movie so much. Zombie Town, Five Nights at Freddy's, Sick, Vacation Friends 2, Silent Night, boy did I hate that movie. Strays, Expendables, and Hypnotic, which I feel like is my Meg 2. Have you seen or do you know about what happens in Hypnotic?
I have seen the trailer. I obviously know it's the new Rodriguez movie. I kind of am tempted to watch it. Like, if it feels
You
like
need to
Robert.
watch it.
Yeah, it
The
feels like
movie
Robert.
it's terrible, but you need to see it.
Okay, maybe I throw that on at some point. I flirted with doing like a Robert Rodriguez run, and then I'm just like he just does so much kind of shit is the issue with Rodriguez. And
Yes.
it for every like Sin City, there's a Sin City a Dame to Kill for. Um yeah, so it's like, okay, I don't, maybe someday, but Hypnotic I will stick on a watch list when I'm not trying to watch 30 Korean movies or catch up on every single award season film from a given year.
What would you say is maybe your biggest disappointment of the year?
What my biggest disappointment of 2023? Realistically, it's probably not jiving with something like The Creator as much as I feel I should have. And obviously I am not a Gareth Edwards guy. I think all of his movies are kind of like solid, like 3 star, 6 out of 10, gentlemen
See, I
sixes
feel
kind of
like a
like.
lot of people are on that wavelength because I'm with you. I think I wasn't necessarily disappointed by the creator because this is what I expect. Like I think it looks really pretty, but it's kind of empty. So I don't know that I was disappointed by it, but I certainly think that it was just pretty to look at, and
Yeah.
I would love to see him direct a movie that he doesn't write.
Well, I mean, obviously, because this one was co-written between him and Chris Weitz, who obviously also did Rogue One, which is a movie that a lot of people really love, and I'm kind of like, I don't love Rogue One. Even the stuff that people love about like Tony Gilroy doing that movie, I'm like, I don't even love the bits that Gilroy kind of like shoved into this thing. Gareth, it just feels like original sci-fi with a kind of like $100 million budget that looks as good as that does should be supported. I just wish it was a better movie, and I think that's why I'm disappointed. It's like, yeah, I've seen all 4 of Gareth Edwards' movies. None of them work for me on a level more than just kind of like appreciating what he can do on a technological level. So maybe he needs to move into that capacity more than a like running a film shoot, essentially, which is arguably what he did on the reshoots of Rogue One.
So I gotta say, Napoleon is probably my biggest disappointment. I remember watching the trailer, and I was like, "This looks spectacular." And I think there are moments that are funny. I know that, I get that there are things that Ridley Scott is trying to do. I don't know that I got enough of it though. It just feels like there was a lot of inconsistency, and like so many other biopics this year, I don't know that he had anything particularly interesting to say about Napoleon. So that's my biggest disappointment. And there's some late Ridley Scott movies that I really liked. The Last Duel I thought was really good. Yeah, that's my biggest disappointment of the year.
Are you excited for the 4-hour Apple TV cut?
I will be very curious to.
Would that fix the issues that you had with the movie, do you think?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, because again, it's one of those things where I'm probably going to need to sit down and watch the whole thing. Like, that's what it'll come down to. I don't know that a 4-hour cut. I mean, if they are exploring the relationship more between Napoleon and his wife, maybe that'll help it. But I also think we need to get away from the extended cut is always better, because just release the extended cut then, if that's, because I feel like that's the thing about Zack Snyder too.
Yeah, I mean, Zack Snyder, like Rebel Moon, is a true example of Netflix trying to maximize on the fact that the Snyder cut was a thing that people were really into, and they're trying to force that to happen again. And it's like, you just made an incompetent movie. You made a movie that is its references and nothing more. Like, yeah, and like the cut with blood and violence and swearing is going to come out, and this doesn't fix anything that was wrong with the movie. You've just whipped up his fans into a frenzy that they're like, oh, this is a true 5-star cut, and critics can finally like shove it. And it's like, no, it's not. Not what anyone needs in this world is Netflix funding vanity projects from someone who is not someone who I like want to see them succeed, and yet they just cannot get out of their own way fundamentally.
Nope. At the end of the day, Zack Snyder cannot get out of his own way. I mean, I will say that in terms of disappointments, I'm just going to put Disney on the list, because I'm looking at the bottom of my list. I've got Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny at 70. I've got Elemental at 81. Quantumania's in the bottom half. Wish, The Little Mermaid. Not a good year for Disney at all, other than Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, just in terms of like Disney movies per se. It's and I'm not counting like Fox Searchlight. Man, it's rough.
Yeah, Disney did not have a good year this year, even with kind of like, I have movies from Disney and Fox Searchlight or 20th Century Studios in my like top 20, top 30, but the output of their blockbusters this year was not a good sign of strength for them as a studio, and I don't know if that is the work of the previous CEO of the business kind of like finally coming into fruition, and like a lot of the mandates that he had kind of set up, or whether or not it's just the complete collapse of like every single silo that Disney has within them kind of like collapsing simultaneously. But like, you cannot picture a world in which Disney would have some of the lowest grossing movies of their entire like tenure, after their 2019, where they had $6 billion grossing movies or $7 billion grossing movies, however many it was. Truly insane. I think apart from Avatar, that was their only $1 billion grosser since Rise of Skywalker.
It's pretty crazy to think. That is the year 2023. We will probably do this again next year for the best of 2024. Ben, anything else to say before we get out of here?
I mean, do you have like 3 movies that you're excited for next year? Like not even like kind of like why you're excited, just like off the dome, like a couple of movies that you're like hyped for next year, in a year that's going to feel very weird and very barren for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to feel very barren. I mean, Dune is probably at the top of my list at this point, just because we were supposed to get it last year. I'm genuinely excited to see what they come up with, because I really like the first one a lot, and I'm very curious. It's going to be a great year for Zendaya, because I'm also looking forward to Challengers. I think that movie could be a meme, but I'm really, really looking forward to that. In terms of like blockbusters, the Fall Guy trailer has me intrigued. I don't know if it's going to be good or not, but I'm looking forward to it.
Don't trust Leach at this point. I just do not.
Yeah,
categorically don't trust him.
But look, there's also, I never want to see the Argyle trailer ever again, so I will be glad when it comes out. I am dreading the discourse around Civil War, And there's also an Amy Winehouse pick that you cannot pay me to see.
Yeah, that one looks rough. I'm really excited to see Nosferatu. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Robert Eggers, so that one's kind of like top of my list. Furiosa, I love all of the Mad Max movies, even kind of like Mad Max 3. So let's see what he got to do with a follow up or a prequel to Fury Road, which I think both of us are on the same page, is like one of the greatest action films of the last 15 years or so.
I mean, Matt Waters is just wrong. He's just flat out wrong.
Just completely. I'm very intrigued if Megalopolis gets to come out this year. We'll see if Francis Ford Coppola gets to kind of end his career with a masterpiece on the same level as Spielberg and Scorsese.
I'm ready to have my heart broken by that movie.
Fingers crossed it's actually good. Obviously, he's using everyone's kind of like favorite leading man at the moment with Adam Driver, so we shall see. What else we got? Like Gladiator 2 could be interesting. Kind of obviously, Ridley Scott feels like he's on a one good movie, one bad movie kind of like run, so we'll see how that one is. I'm very intrigued what the new Twisters movie is going to end up being, because obviously that is Lee Isaac Chung, the director of Minari, but Daisy Edgar Jones, Glenn Powell, Anthony Ramos as your lead three, and apparently it's going to be like kind of like very focused on climate change and kind of like be a bit more of a like front forward message movie. Just an interesting cast, an interesting creative force behind it as well, which is also why I'm like, is Lion King 2 gonna be good with Barry Jenkins?
Again, we've got Beetlejuice 2, we've got Joker 2. I'm just like, oh, it's gonna be a rough final few months, but we also have a new Planet of the Apes. And look, the last trilogy was really good. I know you're not as high on it as I am, but they have earned my trust. I am really excited for the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I mean, that trilogy is probably one of the more underrated trilogies that we've had, and I think the trailer looks very good. So I'm excited for that one too.
Yeah, I think there's going to be bright spots in the next year. It's just no one knows whether or not like. Are we getting the kind of like the cream of the crop, or are we going to get like a lot of stuff that would have been buried, kind of being pushed up to kind of like bigger positions? No one's sure, but 2023. I mean,
we literally have two Sony Spider-Man movies coming out. We have Madam Web, oh my god, and Kraven the Hunter.
Have you seen the very bizarre Madam Web trailer that came out like 2 days ago?
I have seen it, and I don't even know what to say at this
They're
point.
Clearly advertising to a very, very particular subset of their audience, and if it works, good for them. I'm very much looking forward to my bottom 1 and bottom 2 movie of the year with Craven and Madam Web.
What if they're good?
No, we're not even going to entertain this. No, like you can play the line about like he was in the Amazon with my mum when investigating spiders before she died all you want. Madam Web is the Catwoman in terms of like how it's going to look, how it's going to feel. The fact that fucking costumes are being revealed on bottles of juice in Asia, like this is not a movie that is going to succeed in any creative way.
Might make some money. We have another Ghostbusters, which I'm not excited for at all. I think it'll be better. I think it'll be better than the previous one.
Yeah,
but
and
still
I like things that give Carrie Coon money.
I do too. I mean, she's going to be White Lotus season 3, which I'm really looking forward to. At some point, I just need to bite the bullet and watch The Gilded Age, because apparently there's Opera Wars and Carrie Coon's involved.
Again, the only thing holding me back from watching The Gilded Age is Julian Fellows, and realistically, it's not even Julian Fellows' entire career. It's just Downton Abbey, because Gosford Park is a good movie. But I'm just you look at the picture of Julian Fellows on Wikipedia, and you're like, oh, you are such a right wing conservative, aren't you? Like, truly.
Okay, so I'm going to go look at this picture real quick. Oh yeah, it's like he could be the prime minister in like 1975.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I'm seeing that right. And we've also got Godzilla versus another Godzilla Kong movie, which that'll be like a fine 3-star movie, but it gets Rebecca Hall money. And we like when Rebecca Hall gets money too.
Yes, we do.
Anything else
No, nothing
before we get
else.
out of here?
No, 2023 was a great year. I'm actually kind of like a little bit worried about my end of decade list at this point, where I'm like, am I going to have to start like cutting things from my end of the decade list? Because just movies, even though the industry is bad, the actual quality of like some of the smaller input is good, and that is good
So
for me as a
I,
viewer.
I have a best of the 2020s, and I will say that I've got a solid 36 movies, and basically anything I rank 4.5 stars or better goes on that list. I have 36, and it's only been 4 years.
I'm at
That's a pretty good.
45.
I mean,
45
that's
on
even.
my.
I feel like 36 is pretty impressive, but 45 even more so.
I am an easy grader though.
Yeah, but that's why the people love you, Ben. Anything to plug before we get out of here?
I'll be doing some writing at some point this year. I want to kind of push out a top 100 directors of the 2010s because I finally finished my watching all the acclaimed movies from 2010s earlier on this year. That will probably be cross-posted to a personal website for me and the Real World, because obviously we love lists over at the Real World. I'm also going to do a rank list of all of the movies of Hong Sang-soo, which is another big project I had running throughout 2023, where I watched all 30 of director Hong's movies. If you don't know who director Hong is, try and find some way to watch some of his stuff. I'd recommend Right Here, Right Here, Wrong Then, I think is the... God, I'm probably butchering that title.
He is a prolific director, just
Yes.
unbelievable.
Yeah, like truly, like all over the festival circuit. He pumps out kind of like 2 or 3 movies every single year, involved in a very widely publicized affair with Kim Min Hee post The Handmaiden that kind of like led to her being blacklisted, and now the only way you can go see Kim Min Hee in movies is to watch these Hong Sang-soo movies. I'm sure when the festival lineups come out, he'll have directed another 15 movies to come out this year, and I will be starting from the very beginning. But yeah, I think he is one of the best, like maybe not kind of quite on the level of like Bong Joon-ho or Park Chan-wook, but like one of the great voices of Korean cinema, and I very heartily kind of like endorse his entire oeuvre.
For sure. So for me, you can go check out what Brian and I have discussed. We talked about the Back to the Future trilogy. We talked a lot about Godzilla last week. February, we are going to be discussing 4 football movies, which will be very exciting in honor of the Super Bowl. So be sure to check that out. For Ben,
Oh, you mean American football, not actual football?
Not actual football. Sorry. So for Ben, I'm Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back to talk to you again next week. Back with Brian.